If you think about it, the word relate means to communicate. If you relate a story to someone, you are communicating with them. You're telling them the story. So you can't really have a relationship without communication. Today in chapter 9, we're going to talk about communicating with romantic partners. Roman numeral 1, if we were doing an outline, would be the nature of intimacy. Roman numeral 2, communicating in romantic relationships. Roman numeral 3, deception in romantic relationships. And Roman numeral 4 would be managing interpersonal conflict. Now, obviously, we're not doing Roman numerals, but for those of you who like to keep up with it that way, there you go. Roman numeral 1 would be the nature of intimacy. Intimacy in interpersonal relationships. Now this has an asterisk by it because it's not in the book, but I do want you to know the different dimensions of intimacy. We have physical, intellectual, emotional, and interestingly enough, shared activities. So we all can establish intimacy physically, right? And it doesn't have to be just like sex. It could also be giving somebody a hug. It's a good friend. That is a way of establishing intimacy in a friendship. Or it could be like a parent holding their child on their lap while they read them a book at night. That would be an aspect of physical intimacy. So anytime you connect with someone through touch, like through physical intimacy, that is a way of generating intimacy in the relationship physically. Another way we generate intimacy is intellectually. If you've ever been in a class where you just got really engaged, the discussion was fascinating, the other students had interesting things to say, you jumped into the discussion, and by the end of it, the whole class had kind of bonded through really exploring this fascinating territory. That's an example of generating intellectual intimacy. And it doesn't have to be in a class. It could be just one-on-one if you have a good friend that you like to talk to about intellectual stuff, or a sweetie that you like to talk to about intellectual stuff, and you bond through ideas. That, of course, is intellectual intimacy. You can also bond emotionally. And there are two basic ways this happens. You can bond through emotion towards each other, like I love you, right? That would be bonding emotionally. You can also bond through feeling an emotion towards something else. Like maybe you go to a political protest and you get swept up in the emotion there. That would be a way of bonding emotionally. Or you could bond through, a strong dislike of something. So you could bond through a shared passion for something, a shared dislike of something. I once had a student ask, can you bond through mutual hatred of someone else? And the answer is yes. You may have heard the saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So that actually is a basis for bonding. And then finally, shared activities. We used to not count shared activities as an aspect of intimacy or a way of building intimacy. We thought it just had to be physical, intellectual, or emotional. But then we started to realize that sometimes people just hang out together. And just through hanging out together and doing stuff together, you don't have to talk to each other, but you are building intimacy. My dad and I, he used to live in a house at the top of a hill, and at the bottom of the hill there was a lake. And so I would go visit, and we would go out at 5 o'clock in the morning and get in a canoe on the lake and go fish and watch the sun come up. And at 5 o'clock in the morning, I am not having an intellectual or emotional conversation with anybody. I'm barely alive. So, we didn't have a conversation. It was just we were in the canoe together, fishing, watching the sun come up. And that actually is a way to bond. It's a way to connect with another person and generate intimacy. Now, at this point, if we were doing this in class, I would say, who is more likely to generate intimacy through shared activities, men or women? And the answer is men. Yes, men in general are more likely to build intimacy through shared activities. In fact, they don't feel as comfortable sharing on an intellectual or an emotional level until they have hung out together, until they've done stuff together. Women, on the other hand, feel more comfortable sharing through talk, right? Building intimacy through talking with each other, and then they are more comfortable just hanging out silently. In fact, that's the next slide. Male and female intimacy styles. Women tend to bond through talk. They don't even have to be in the same room together. They just feel like talk is the thing that builds their relationship and helps them bond. So they could be talking over the phone, they could be talking in person, but the thing that matters is the talk. Meanwhile, men bond through shared activities. So a long time ago, back when I was first married, my husband and I were in the living room. He's watching TV, I'm reading a book. Eventually, the TV gets too loud and distracting, so I go upstairs to read my book. And he came upstairs with me, turned off the TV downstairs, came upstairs, turned on the TV upstairs so he could be in the same room with me. And at the time, I did not know why he did this. I was like, why are you following me around the house? But that was the way, for him, that was the way we bonded. That's the way we built intimacy. So I wish that I had learned that in a communication class, and I would have been able to recognize that for him, just being in the same room together counted as a way of building intimacy, even if we weren't talking with each other. And that's just not the way my brain worked. So part of being in a relationship is figuring out how the other person views and maintains intimacy.